Hi everybody, my name is Julie Mann. I'm a professional network marketer, I'm an actor, and I'm also an EFT practitioner. And I'm really excited because today I'm joined by Dr. Veronica Murray, who's in the States. And she is the founder of the Now Center for Wellness, which provides organic health and wellness programs and leadership training as well. So welcome, Veronica, great to see you.
I'm so glad to be here with you. You're so bubbly. I just love it.
So I know that you and I spoke a few days ago, and I know a little bit about you, but I just want to really ask you to tell your story because, you know, obviously where you are now and founding the Now Center is not, you know, wasn't what you were doing a while back. So if you can just tell everyone your journey, that would be fantastic.
Okay, well, awesome. Let's see where to start. I guess I'll go back to give me a second. Okay, pivotal point. We'll go to the pivotal point. Long story made short, I'm like a little country girl that grew up in the country in a rural area where my neighbors were like literally, you know, like rabbits and squirrels and turkeys, and we had the lake behind the house, that whole deal. So growing up, that was my thing, and being outside and in nature, and I absolutely loved it. I was Miss Mud Cakes, you know, serving those up and all of that. And the reason why I bring that up, I didn't know that my life would take a full 360 back to nature, where I actually found my healing, my true healing, and found my true identity. As I was growing up, and we grew up, I want to say meager, but we grew up like in a poverty level. But here was the thing, I didn't know it. I didn't know that we were, you know, broke or not rich. You know, both of my grandparents, they had gardens, and we would go in the gardens, we would pick fresh veggies, and we had the fruit trees, and that's how we ate, and that's how we did things. I'd run around outside without the shoes, and you know, blah blah blah. But it took for me to, as I was going through school, to realize when you hear people say, hey, you're not going to this restaurant and getting this, and I'm like, no, should I? When I started feeling like I was kind of lacking things. And then as I kind of got older, it was more so like, hey, you're going to have to do this to make this type of money. So my ideas about the way I was living naturally and holistically switched from it was a good thing to I was doing something wrong. You know what I mean? And I don't know if anybody else can understand what I'm saying when I say this, but it was like what you were doing as a child, it was innocent, it was pure, and it just felt good, it just felt right. But as I continued to go through school, I was being taught completely the opposite. I was being taught I should be trying to make money, I should be trying to be, you know, in this status and this whatever. And so as I kind of move forward, one of the things that I used to do as well, and I'm getting to a point. I'm saying this because I'm getting to a point. So thank you so much for allowing me to go on this little journey to tie in everything I'm saying. But one of the things I enjoyed doing a lot too, and I didn't realize the title, but I love to draw, I love to create. And I did these things, and I was perfecting it, but I was told I would never make money from that. And it was just a lot of things going on in my mind where it was like, my whole way of life, my whole way of thinking was wrong. I was taught that it was wrong through television, through commercials, through, believe it or not, through my pastors, through other people. It's like, you need to make money. You have to be this person. You have to show up in the world like this. And that kind of allowed me to push myself to the back. The things I love to do, it pushed it to the back. As I move a little fast forward, I ended up meeting a beau, and I ended up liking him to the point where I became a teenage mommy. And once I became a teenage mommy, things in my mind, I was like, I have to make sure she's taken care of, and I want to make sure things are right. And that actually led to me saying, you know what? I like the idea of nursing. I like taking care of people. It reminded me of my grandma because she always had all these herbs and things to make sure we were taken care of. And it just felt like the right, noble thing to do. And hey, I would always have a job. That's what went in my mind. I would always have a job. And I ended up finding out that I loved it. I loved it. I loved nursing. It's just being around the people, talking with the people. It was great. But one of the things that I didn't love so much about it is when I learned that nursing was a business. It was not so much about the patient as it was with the business. And as I continued to move forward, working as a nurse and just learning and engaging, because it was a business, I want to say, and I'm trying to say this in a way where I don't want to sound derogatory because nursing is awesome. But while I was there, I learned that the system is not so great. The system is broken. And it's so broken to the fact where we're treating patients to be chronic patients, to continue to be patients, even to the fact that we're recruiting our nurses and our doctors and we're becoming patients. And I became one of those patients. My health was, I didn't even realize that I'm just moving along and I'm working and I'm like overworking. I'm serious. I'm like just overworking because I just kept wanting to help. And it was just like one day I look in the mirror, I'm almost 400 pounds. And a lot of people will say, well, surely you saw that. Well, no, I didn't. I mean, look, I'm fabulous. I look fabulous. I feel fabulous. I can't be overweight. I can't be sick. And when I ended up going to the doctor and he was telling, I was diagnosed with gallstones. And that was like a wake-up call for me. And not only that, when I was working on the unit, I worked in a mental health unit, and during one of my sessions about addiction, one of my patients says to me, you know, and I'm like on the soapbox about drugs and alcohol and what you shouldn't. And, you know, he politely raises his hand and he was like, Miss Murray, is food an addiction? And he's looking at me like I knew what he was saying. And I felt like this big. So that coupled with the ideal of the gallstones, it really got my mind on the thought of, wait a minute, what's happening? And then all of a sudden what started to stand out to me was, as I was caring for my patients, how many drugs I was providing them. One drug messed the body up, so now you need two. And it was just, as nurses, we call them like Easter baskets. Like this one, he has an Easter basket. And they just kept stacking up and stacking up. And it literally started to bother me. It started to weigh in on my heart. Like, I'm not a nurse, I'm not helping. I'm a drug dealer. And what really just nailed in that thought was, we had drug reps like whining and dining us like, hey, get the doctors to get this and get the doctor to do this. And I'm like, it has to be something better. It has to be a better way. So with that and just some really serious soul searching, I ended up taking a step back from nursing. And I says, I really would like to find a better way. And that's what happened. I stopped nursing and I went back to school and I went for Christian counseling. It made sense to me. You know, I love mental health. I knew we had to do some reworking with the thinking. And I'm like, that's it. But here was the fun that God rerouted me and ended up finding a course, or I always like to believe that the course found me, where it's applied eco-psychology, where it's saying, let nature teach. It was just a simple, and I'm like, This is so hokey. Yeah, right. But it was so intriguing. And I think the most intriguing part was, and I didn't know it at the time, but I believe it was connection of when I was younger and how much fun I had just playing outside, no judgment, just doing my thing and going to the garden with my grandmother and picking the fruit, sitting in the trees. I mean, I was like a tomboy. I love climbing in the trees and just sitting up there. That was the thing. And I remember looking at the clouds. You know, I don't know. It was just like amazing. And all those memories kind of came back and it just helped me to say, yeah, I'm going to go this route. And so as I continued to kind of move through in that way, on the quest to help other people, mind you, you know, I'm a nurse. That's what we do. We'll help ourselves next, but we have to help everybody else. And not to mention I'm a mommy. I'm going to take the back seat. But I didn't know, was as I was going through the course and the way the course was designed, I had to get it before I can give it to someone else. And I'm learning and end up taking this wonderful course through a program or discipline established, developed by Dr. Teresa Sweeney, which is eco art therapy. Okay, yeah, I'm in love. Art and nature, boom, that was it. And so with that being said, I just went through and I didn't realize as I'm going through, I'm losing the weight. People are asking me, what are you doing? And I'm like, what are you talking about? But they were like, you look so different. You're glowing. You look great. And when I would say to them, it's just me reconnecting with nature and this is what I do. And they were like, huh? I don't get it. And I'm like, it's that simple. Just like, what? Do you talk to the trees? I says, no, I've learned to listen to them. And so I continued moving through that. And really now this is becoming really selfish. I mean, I'm like this. I'm like really intrigued and I'm excited. And as I was going through the course, I knew I wanted to go back into the health and wellness field or in the health field. And I thought I was going to go back as a nurse, but I ended up getting my certification through the wellness inventory, which allowed me to become a national board certified health and wellness coach. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And then I'm like, okay, things are coming together for me. Things are really coming together because I love the principle, patient first. And it wasn't even patient, it's client first. Meet them where they are. Help them achieve their wellness. Help them achieve their well-being. And little did I know, that was my next pivotal point because I'm so into it. I'm like, I want to help people get well-being. That's great. I want to do that. That's what I want to do. So I'm like Googling, I'm like researching, what is well-being? What is well-being? What is this? There's no conclusive definition for well-being. What? I don't understand. And so I asked myself this question, I said, how are you supposed to help someone else get something you don't even know what it is? I'm serious. And I'm just like, I felt like such a, so I'm asking different people, I'm like surveying, I'm like, seriously, like, you've been doing this. What is well-being? Well, I think it's, but we're professionals. Shouldn't we know? So you know what I did? I went back to nature. And I asked the question, and I was sitting on the porch one morning. We'll never forget this. I'm sitting on the porch one morning, balcony, because it's on the back. And I love looking at the water. I'm looking at the water. And I says, what is well-being? And I saw the trees. And they just like swing, bang, and it's like, I see them interconnected in a relationship with the sky and receiving the air and the water. And I just saw it. I saw it. It was so clear. And I'm like, wow. I think that's well-being. And I says, okay. And I just kind of sat with it for a second, but then I went to a park, my favorite park here. I live in Florida and I love the beaches, but there's a park here and there's a tree. It's like 300 years old century. And I treat this tree like, I mean, this tree is my friend, like seriously, but I didn't know anybody here, but I would go and sit under this tree. And now this is where it's going to say, this lady sounds crazy, but the tree, old century, started to talk with me and says, you're asking what is well-being. But what stood out to me is old century has been here 300 years. And they have the placard written how old century survived the Civil War and how it has survived so many hurricanes. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's well-being. And the branches were so big and majestic and it had ferns growing on it. And I would look at the people interacting with it. I would look at how birds and everything. And I'm like, this is well-being. And Old Century just spoke to my heart and says, you are well-being. And I tied all of that in. Of course, with me, going through this and I this is part of my study. I started working on my study at that particular time, not even really knowing I was doing a study. But I started to characterize what is well-being. And I recognized and understood that I was well-being. And I'm just documenting and writing all this down. And as I shared this with my professors and the director of the program with at the Applied Eco-Psychology program, she says to me, you have to write this down. You have your doctorate and you don't even know it. We need to know this. Do the study, write it down. And that's what I did. And I was so excited about what I found is, it's just who we are. Well-being is who we are. It's in our DNA. It is who we are. And once I found that out, I'm like, I want to tell everybody this. Unfortunately, it was met with a lot of controversy. How can you be well-being? What about people who can't see? What about people who are gay? What about people who are autistic? They're not well-being. Well, of course they are. You don't know this because we've been taught to only think with our five senses, that we only have five senses. See, now I've learned through research and personal validation that we have 54.
I was going to ask you about that, actually.
Yeah, please.
Well, I was just going to say, that obviously that's the way most of it's been brought up, those five senses. But actually what you say is that people really, with only thinking they've got five, they're then trapped in this kind of survival mode. Whereas with 54, it looks a whole lot different. So what are these 54?
Well, you already know, well, we're going to go with the five, which we're good with. Is like taste, seeing, hearing, feeling, and hearing. But then here we have breathing, sense of breathing. And someone said, it's not a sense. That's not a sense. Yeah, it is. See, what these actually are, and I don't want to get all, because it's like this scientist has proven and this scientist has proven and this theory and this theory. When it all comes down to it, I think the word we are okay with now is our energies. And we have these energies, and with these particular energies, we recognize them and we perceive them as senses. Breathing is one, and they connect us to nature. And when you're in nature, automatically your 54 senses are revived, they're nurtured, and they know exactly what to do. They come in line, they come into order. Have you noticed when you go outside, you're like, I feel good. But you don't really know why. That's why. See, you don't have to, you're not focused so much on what your sense of reason is one. And it's like, oh, I have to go to work today. I have to do this. What happens when you go outside And nature automatically, it sets everything into place. Sense of motion is another one. The wind blows or you see it moves. Your body just connects to it and it moves within it. And it just feels right. But see, we've been taught to not think on those things. It's just your opinion. It's highly subjective, but it's not subjective. It has been proven that these energies are aware of themselves. And so if you lack, and you don't lack it, but if you have ignored your sense of breathing, and you're not breathing as you should. You know, we have a lot of breathing meditations. Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
And people are retraining people in the way that you breathe. It's simply because that's one of the energies. And once you, and I keep saying go outside, it's just you, it happens naturally. And you just connect and you don't fight with what's happening. And so when you ask about the 54 senses, I'm just bringing up some that when you start thinking about it, it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that sense of color. Have you know, you said, before we started talking, you said, that's my favorite color.
Yeah, which keeps changing as you, which is totally magical and mesmerizing, but yeah.
Yeah, but see, that's an energy that is a conscious energy that keeps your well-being at optimal levels. And a lot of times you think, oh, color doesn't matter. I'm just going to ask you, does it matter if you go into a room and the color's off to you? Does it matter?
And I happen to know that orange actually is a color of well-being. It kind of lifts the spirits. I know that. You know, green, people have green rooms because that's supposed to be calming. You know, yeah, absolutely, it works. Yeah. So I'm just really curious then, Veronica, how long did it take you to discover these 54 other energy connections, and how did you discover them?
Again, it was through once I went into my discipline, which is that's what I have my doctorate in. I have my master's and my doctorate in applied eco-psychology, actually. And here's what's really cool. We were provided a list. And it's not where you say, okay, I'm just gonna look at the list and I'm gonna go to the library and I'm gonna, go and Google it. No, that would have been way too simple. We have to validate it. If do you see it? Do you sense it? Do you feel it? Go into nature. And that's how I learned them. It's through nature. Remember I started out and it says, let nature teach. And I would go out and do these exercises. And as I'm sitting with nature and I'm like, movement, wait a minute, sense of movement. And I learned how that movement played into my well-being. I was walking on nature walks. See, I was exercising and didn't know it. I just started walking and I just felt like I needed to do it. It was because I started to pay attention to my sense of movement's voice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And here's me, I love the ocean.
Me too.
It taught me such a wonderful lesson because see, when I would eat, I ate because it made me feel good. It wasn't just because you're like, I'm just going to eat. That wasn't it. It comforted me. Mm-hmm. But see, I didn't realize that with me being a nurse, I was a chronic caregiver. Nurse, mom, activist for the community. I'm serious. Every volunteer position that you could probably think of, everybody in my city, they knew who I was. If I went, I couldn't go anywhere. And they was like, hi, Veronica, because I was a speaker, I was the board chair, whatever. But see, what I didn't realize until here I'm sitting one day at the ocean. And one of the things I love about it so much, I would sit there, but I would notice how the waves would come, but they would only come so far and it would go back. And I was so intrigued by that. So I'm looking at my list again. I'm like, sense of boundary. which is sense of territory. Nature was telling me that's what I needed to nurture at that time, was my sense of boundary. It's okay to help others, but set a boundary. I was giving so much of myself out that I wasn't realizing that I didn't save anything for myself. I was burning out, and I was feeding that burnout with food. And I'm like, oh, sense of boundary. Oh, I get it. I get it. So I'm like writing this down, and I get it. And see, here's the thing, because people will say, Veronica, what do you do? Like, tell me. And that's one of the hardest things that I felt like I don't know how to really explain it. But once I started to talk to them about it, they're like, oh, I do get it. I did that. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. You want to do it some more? And so when they ask me, what do I do? One of the things I love, and I'm calling out the senses as we go, I'm just kind of like, it's sense of space and proximity. That's what I do. That's what I love now. I create a space for you, whoever it is that I come in contact with. You could be a client, you could be somebody that I meet on the beach, in the store, but I love that I can create a space for you that you can explore, that you can see and recognize that you're well-being. And I've learned how to make sure I save space for me, understanding that I'm well-being. So that's the energy that I put out. So in that little zone, in that place, if no one else has you don't have a place anywhere else, we have that little space. And as you're there in that space, you're like, yeah, this is good. This exists. Well-being exists. I don't have to buy it. It is who I am because you're discovering it. It's not about me telling you. It's about you discovering it. That's what I do.
Love that. And I know that you're interested in so many different things. You love kite flying, you love crochet, yeah. You like belly dancing. I mean, so how important do you think it is, Veronica, for people to be having fun and exploring new things? How important is that for us as human beings?
You have to. You have to. That is well-being. That is why I get so excited about who we are as a person. You remember when I started out, I'm telling that long, weary story about, I grew up like this, but once I went to school, they said, no, you have to do this, and you have to do that. We get so cookie cutter that we feel like in order for me to make money, I have to do this and I have to do that. No, be you, have fun. I'm going to tell you something that's like really cool. This is like for real. I would make crocheting. I literally did not know how to crochet, but I was just so intrigued. I was curious. How do they get a piece of string and it forms like this blanket? How do they do that? So I'm like, I'm going to learn this. And honestly, it was like maybe a month later, I just woke up and said, I'm going to crochet. And I started crocheting, and I wanted to crochet little hats for preemies in the hospitals. And they had, it was as far as the homelessness rate, and I was homeless at the time, but I wanted to do something for those who were, and I was staying in a hotel with my family or whatever, but I'm about like the homeless who were living on the street. And I wanted them to have something, though I couldn't provide them a house, but I enjoyed crocheting. So it says blankets and scarves, and I would just whip them up. And that kind of grew. And I'm going to tell you what ended up happening. When we moved here to Florida, and they had an exhibit, and it was like, bring stuff that makes people happy. And I'm like, oh, and I would crochet these little jellyfish, and I call them happy jellies. That was my thing. And I'm like, and people were just buying them and just buying them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had started generating income from something I loved. And the same thing with me in art. I love to just paint. So I started getting people like, will you paint them? And I started generating income from painting. What? I wasn't trying to do that. But that's like, we love being around. We want to see it. We want this. And so that's the thing. That has been my life. Whatever it is that I love and that I do that comes from me and my well-being, I want people to know that if you follow your purpose and you do what you do, you will get the money, you'll get it. And so like you said, flying, I'll go out, I literally keep a kite in the trunk of my car. Because I might want to just stop and go and fly it. But because I do that, I have met the most interesting people and made the biggest connections. And they come to me. I don't have to be like, excuse me, excuse me. They come to me. They're like, you look so happy. You look so peaceful. And it draws people in and the conversation starts. So when you say in the belly dancing, I do it because I love it. And it makes me happy. And that happiness just grows. And people come to me and we just do that thing. I want everybody to do that. That's my word. I just want people to experience that.
It's just magnetic, isn't it? When we are loving what we're doing, people, of course, they're attracted because ultimately everyone wants to be happy, don't they?
I would think. I've learned, but I have learned that some people are okay with not, which is okay because, you know, sometimes you have to be in that zone. But for those who are ready to come out of that zone, I'm your gal. And sometimes you don't even, sometimes you didn't even know, because I've had people to say, now this is, I have so many stories, but I worked in corrections and I would come in, I'm like, yeah, and I would write the silly knock jokes on the board and everybody be like, ugh, seriously. But by the time I was about to leave, and one of the doctors that worked there, and he says, Veronica, we were dead set on hating you. You got on our nerves coming in here, bubbly with those corny jokes. And he says, well, doggone it, before you got us all to laugh, to smile, and we love you for that. Thank you. So yeah, I'm that nuisance where it's like, I kind of want to be stuck and not want to smile and do that. Well, you might not want to be around because I think you really, like you said, you probably want to be happy. You just didn't think you could be. So
yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And actually, you know, we talked a little bit about most people surviving. So have you got any kind of advice or simple tips for people to perhaps start going from that surviving to thriving? Is there something that they can do that, you know, is really simple steps that can really start them on that journey to thriving and you know, whatever that looks like for them?
It's one small thing that I actually do, and I do say this to everybody, because as we know, I call the name of my business the Now for a reason. Now is where all your power resides. That's your nature of well-being. And I just say to yourself, because there is so much power in your words. Say, now I. It's just a small, simple step. Now I, and finish it. Don't be like, oh my gosh, well, tomorrow in 5 minutes I have to. No, now I thrive. And sit. Now I am beautiful. Now I am thankful for. But just say, now I. So much power in that. Keep yourself right here in your present moment, in your power. Because the way, when I talk about your senses, the way that they work in the present moment, they work in the now. And as you get your mind in alignment with who you actually are, it's going to help you. Now, it sounds like it can't be that easy. Try it.
I can totally get it, Veronica. I totally get that. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That people are looking for hard. You know, life's hard. It's such a struggle. We've been taught, you know, but actually it doesn't have to be that way. And if people are just kind of willing to explore then who knows what's possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if anyone watching wants to hear more about you, and why wouldn't they, then how would they do that?
Well, I invite them to follow me on my Facebook page, which is Now I Am Well, which is also my website, nowiamwell.com. And Instagram, I wonder where am I there? Now I Am Well. And the reason why I say that is because you know, it's going to get you to say, wait a minute, now I'm well. I want to like, now I am well. I am. Now I am well. That's how you find me. Through your affirmation.
Easy peasy. Okay.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. So I just want you to have the last word. So any words of wisdom before we close?
Words of wisdom is never forget who you are and live it now.
That sent shivers down my spine. Veronica, thank you so much. I've absolutely loved talking to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to gab on. You are so awesome. So awesome.